Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the living room. Normally we have a video message that comes out over the weekend, about 15 minutes long, but this week is special. We have an hour-long conversation between myself and Heather Thalheimer. And the cool thing is, it's great subject material. The topic is finding your spiritual style. So I hope you check it all out. There's 9 different styles that Heather has been researching and putting into workshops and all kinds of stuff. So it's a real treat that she could just boil this down, put it forth in a concise way. And I hope you really enjoy it. Thanks so much, and God bless. All right. Hello there. Welcome to the living room. My name is Joe Young, and joining me today is my dear friend, Heather Thalheimer. Heather's achievements and skills are many, but just to go through a little bit about what she's done, Heather Thalheimer is a co-founder of WholeHearted, an organization that supports organizational innovation, personal growth, and a heart-centered community. Heather is the co-creator and facilitator of Radical Wholeness, a 10-week online journey that supports individuals to transition from toxic achievement to radical wholeness. She is the creator of 4-Minute Fridays on WholeHearted's podcast and the author of Being WholeHearted. Finding new ways of thinking and living, Heather loves books of all shapes and sizes and is fascinated by the power of words and ideas to transform people's lives. She is a writer, a content creator, and has traveled the world presenting at seminars and conferences. Heather has extensive experience in the nonprofit world and offers executive coaching and conscious leadership training for teams. As a coach, Heather recognizes the power of friendship and community in building a wholehearted life. You can learn more about WholeHearted at www.beingwholehearted.com. And with that, I'd like to welcome you, Heather. Hi.
Oh, wow.
How are you?
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Joe, and have this conversation tonight.
Awesome.
Feel very honored.
Well, this is so exciting. This conversation signaled this idea that we kind of came up with, signals to me that there's a lot of flow around what you're doing. There's a lot of energy. What I noticed in my life is when things happen sort of joyfully, sporadically, kind of whimsically, then you kind of know you're going in the right direction.
Right.
And when I speak with you, that's always the feeling.
Ditto.
Yeah, so I'm really excited. I've known you as a friend and as a mentor in many ways in ministry. But I am really excited to learn about a specific kind of topic that came up in our last conversation, which was having different spiritual styles, which I think is, I understand that you have a lot to present on this topic. So I'm going to give you the floor, so to speak, in a minute. But just to preface it, I really love this topic because my spiritual life took a kind of an upgraded, it upgraded and took a turn for the better when I kind of realized that the stereotypical go to the church altar, get on knees and pray is not the only way to do it. And you can pray in many different ways. Sometimes you'll have a spiritual insight in the car. Sometimes you'll have I like to pace when I talk on the phone, and then I realize I kind of pace when I pray. So when I kind of took off all the preconceptions and just kind of let myself explore how to connect to something, deeper wisdom inside or from God, I really feel that that helped a lot. But anyway, I'm going on a little too long. I definitely want to hear your thoughts about why you got into this, developing ideas on this topic. I'm very curious. I haven't heard any of this, so I'll let you go.
Actually, for the same reason that you just shared, Joe, because I just came to the realization we're not all created the same. And the way that we try to connect to ourselves is unique to us. And how could I think about that? How could I describe it? And I was very fortunate because I read a couple of great books. Because, hey, as you mentioned, I love books of all shapes and sizes. And two books that I read, oh my gosh, like maybe 10 years ago, was one by Dr. Amira Perrine. And her book is What's Your God Language? Connecting with God Through Your Unique Spiritual Temperament. And another one by Gary Thomas, who, Sacred Pathways, Discover Your Soul's Path to God. And of course, being a content creator, then I had to take those ideas and run with them. So to develop something that I felt reflected what I was trying to personally say. And, I recognize we are all spiritual beings in the sense there's a part of us, we may call it the mind or consciousness, that's invisible and distinct, from our own physical bodies. So whether you're religious or not religious, there is this kind of spiritual nature that we all have. And the question is, came to me, well, then how do we nurture that? How do we connect to that? And then how do we nurture that? And my growing consciousness of we need to nurture it in our own different ways. And life taught me a lot about that because I'm married to a mountain guide who does not like to go to church on Sundays. And, sometimes in my life, I would kind of like struggle with that. Well, like, don't you think it's a good thing to do? And, but what I noticed was that when he went into the mountains, he was refreshed. He received inspiration. Actually, he heard his own inner truth and came back refreshed. And I had to respect that. And I came across this great quote by John Muir. And he said, I'd rather be in the mountains thinking about God than in church thinking about the mountains. And I think that just about describes my husband. And then I noticed that my own, just like everyone has a personality that's different, right? We all have a spiritual style that is somewhat different and needs to be nurtured in different ways. And mine, according to this survey that I can be sharing with you later, is I came down as an intellectual, hence the books, right? And an intellectual, in terms of the spiritual style, means that you receive inspiration from words. So I can open a book and then I get so spoken to through those words. And then I'm all excited and I'll go to someone, I'll go to my husband, go like, this is amazing. You have to read this sentence. And then my husband goes, okay, so, it was like underwhelming. But I realized that, that is not how God speaks to him. That is not how he connects to the divine. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And in raising a family too, and I think as parents, we often you're a parent too, right? We often make mistakes because we expect our children to think and be as we are, and that's simply not the case. And I think that's especially so when it comes to things that are very close to our heart. So if we have a religious tradition that's very close to our heart, then naturally we want that, for those people that we care about, but it may not float their boat. Mm-hmm. And so if it doesn't float their boat, does that mean it's wrong? And, I came to really contemplate on this, think about this, that it's not like there's a right or a wrong way. It's more about who you are, and how you connect to the divine, how you connect to perhaps even just your own conscience, how you connect to your mind, how you connect to the spiritual part of yourself. And what's important is to understand that so that you can really nurture it. And there's a beautiful saying by the poet Rumi. He said, beyond right or wrong, or beyond right and wrong, there is a field, and I will meet you there. And I love that quote because it's always like we're always trying to make other people right.
Yeah.
But instead of worrying about whether they're right or wrong or whether we're right or wrong, just to accept that and know that we can meet each other beyond our differences. And that's what is most important. So I felt that in studying about spiritual temperament, that I could expand my understanding, because we go to we go to church, and this is one thing. I've worked with a lot of youth and young adults, and there's this kind of challenge in their lives. Perhaps they went to church as a family and they felt like, well, I go to church, I do the whole ritual thing, whether it's, a Catholic church or a Protestant church or maybe a mosque, whatever, their religion is. I go there and I don't feel anything. And
Mm.
so the next question is then, well, what's wrong with me? And
Mm.
because I don't feel anything, maybe there's something wrong with me, or maybe God doesn't exist and this is all nonsense. And you can easily slip into that space of thinking, oh, well, and you kind of leave behind, that search for spirituality.
Mhm.
And I would like to really be able to offer people the opportunity to, instead of saying, hey, what's wrong with me, to recognize, well, maybe that doesn't float my boat. And that doesn't mean you don't ever go to church or ever do things with other people,
Mhm.
in the sacred realm that are collective. But it's recognizing, who you are and how you connect, and making sure that you nurture that part of yourself. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I want to just share with you a beautiful quote by James Houston. He's a theologian, and he talks about being authentic with God, which I love. Like, I love that concept. And he said, we can't simply meet God as others meet him, because God will only meet us in the authentic place, that place within ourselves that is unprocessed, candid, and sincere. And I love that. And I'm just wondering, like, do you resonate with that in your own journey? Because I know you've had, a beautiful and interesting journey. And I'm wondering how that quote lands for you.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, it's another term that I think of it as is a showdown prayer. Yeah.
Yes, right.
I guess that's maybe more masculine or just more theatrical view. But absolutely, when I let's say I'm praying, and again, my prayer is not because I bow my head perfectly and do all the formalities. I might be pacing in my kitchen, but when I'm having this kind of mental message with God or with the divine, I get much more I get more of a responsiveness, or I get more of an input coming back when I'm just more raw. Like,
Mm,
I don't
mm,
want to to fill in the blank, right? Like, just
right.
admitting, maybe it's very close to like there's an art form to this idea of confession, right? Or just
Yeah.
being fully truthful.
Mm,
So I think that's kind of the place it's a little hard to get to if you're not used to that muscle. But actually, it's just about letting your guard down and believing in that. To me, what recently I kind of unlocked this idea that God's grace is much stronger than we realize, and that means you can lower your guard down and be more authentic.
right.
So
Right.
I've been trying to pray on that, or maybe even encourage others to think about that.
Mm,
And I really love the idea of really being enlightened about spiritual styles, because it liberates the idea that something what's wrong with me, that's
right.
brilliant, and but it also liberates what's wrong with them.
Right. Yes. Actually, that's true.
Because I people have come up to me, oh, so you're a pastor or you're a minister, or people might have heard from a friend or whatever, and they'll tell me stories, and one story was, I kind of grew up Christian, and but then recently my business partner, he said he was saved and he was a Christian, but he did some shady stuff with the money, and then but he was so sure that he was saved no matter what he did, right? So
Mm,
he felt like this sort of, well, there's no way all this Christian stuff can be right,
right.
because his because and then so you can kind of ease off of the what's wrong with them,
Oh, I
That
love that, Joe.
that's good. That's good for our spirit, right? We don't, if we get into
Yeah.
that space of what's wrong with other people, we our spiritual quality struggles to grow in that space.
No, it's beautiful what you're saying, and I loved what you said about shared about grace because, if we need to kind of come into that authentic space where we can truly be ourselves and be honest and candid, then, without an understanding of grace or acceptance, then there's no ability to do that. So I think that's fundamental. And I actually
Mhm.
heard your message, Joe, and I highly recommend it to anybody because it was great. I was like, yeah, I need to think more about that. I need to open my heart actually more to that. It's beautiful.
Me too. Me too. I'm not a master at any of this.
Right.
Not in the least.
Um,
Well, but
yeah.
I have down here that um you have actually like detailed out. Now, is this like a book that you're working on, or is this like an essay or an online article that we can find? But I have that we have that you've been working on the 9 spiritual styles, and I am
Yeah.
really, really curious to know what they are because
Yeah.
it took me many years to figure out what mine is, and then it's taken me even more years to figure out what my wife's is. And
Yeah.
she's also a mountain person, you know.
Mm,
It's like a world to it's like a never-ending journey to get to know your spouse or to get to know any one of
right.
your family members. And so I've been
Mm,
learning that. So I'm very curious to when I learn about these spiritual styles, I feel like I'm going to be able to get to know people more quickly and
mhm.
more accurately and more sincerely, I believe.
Yeah, I love what you said about more sincerely because it's really about appreciating who we are and actually who others are instead of trying to get them to fit in a box. And I think sometimes, in religious traditions, there's that feeling, even if it's not, intended. Like I think Jesus was probably the most out of the box person on ever, and
I think
yeah,
so too.
yeah, but then we get this kind of impression that you have to be in this box. And
Yeah.
I think for me, learning about the spiritual styles kind of enabled me to expand beyond that. And
Yeah.
it's been incredibly useful, and I so appreciate it. And it's based on the work of Dr. Mara Perrine, as I said, and Gary Thomas. But, I've developed it. I've developed a workshop,
Mm,
which
okay.
can be online. It's going to be online in November as well. I've written some articles about it. So, I think I could share a blog post with you or something like that.
Mhm.
So, if you like, I could tell you a little bit about there are 9 spiritual styles, and I could just describe them briefly. And
Absolutely.
if you connect to it, it sounds like your wife is a naturalist, and
Nice.
and
Yeah.
that's the first one. And when you're a naturalist, your spirituality allows you to experience God through the beauty, grandeur, and order of the natural world. And of
Mm,
course, we are able to connect to all these various ways of connecting to the divine in ourselves. There's a predominant kind of nature within us. But say, for instance, I wouldn't classify myself as quote unquote a naturalist, but I was just driving home this afternoon. Of course, it's fall in New England, and the sun was setting and the light on the trees, and it was like they were on fire. And I just like found myself, in awe. And then there was this like thank you that rose within me. And, that's like a natural thank you to the creator or to God or to the divine or to life or whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter. But the word, is just like thank you. And I think naturalists, like my husband, really become rejuvenated in nature. And there's
mhm.
something that speaks to them there. So that's and I think included in that would be animals and, every aspect of the creation. And then
Mm,
the second one is the sensor. And this is the person who feels God in the beauty that is around them through their 5 physical senses. So
mm,
somebody, okay, you're to me, Joe, you can perhaps not resonate with this, but to
mm.
me, you are a sensor, because a sensor is someone who finds beauty in music, for instance.
Mm.
It's through the five physical senses. Like, you hear music and you find yourself like naturally elevate. Okay, you tell me, you're a sensor, in my opinion. But
Yeah, well,
tell me about it.
I haven't heard the other seven styles yet,
Well, you could be more than, actually,
but
most of us are a combination of two or three styles. And I
well,
think, to me, the ideal would be you would develop all nine to fully experience life. But
yeah.
it does, being a sensor and finding beauty and God in music or painting or in the senses, does that resonate with you?
It does to a certain extent. I mean, I something clicked for me when I heard somebody describe that being an artist is actually being someone who is what's the right word? It's a bad word actually, but reactive.
Mm.
Like so when something like pings your heart to like ding, like you see that little bird, or you hear that little you hear a conversation in the neighboring booth at the restaurant, and just something, and it pings your heart, and then it can spark an entire song if you kind of chase it.
Right.
Or you could just kind of ignore it and go, "Oh, oh, that was interesting," and then move on. But what
Mm-hmm.
I've learned as a writer and as an artist is when you feel a little ping on your heart, you chase it, you really think about it, you journal about it, you go for it. So I think that there is some kind of sensor stuff going on there. I relate to that.
Oh. Um, okay. I think you also just described a contemplative, but we'll come to that in a
Okay.
minute. I'll keep
Okay.
you on tenderhooks.
Nice. Nice. Nice.
But you see, a sensor would even find God, say, through food, through that sense. I was watching, is
Hmm.
it like a hundred steps?
Did,
I don't
did
know,
you
it's some
did you
movie.
say finding God through food?
Yes, it's a thing,
Now
Joe. It's a
that's the
thing.
style I want. If can I switch styles?
You can.
Can
Well, you
I
could
switch?
develop that style within
Okay,
yourself. Put it that way. You can
that's
actually
the one I want.
awaken. You could awaken that style within you. No,
Oh
but I'm
man.
reminded of a movie I watched where it was about this restaurant, and this Indian mother was like cooking for her children, and I realized it was actually a work of art and beauty, and her senses and her taking in the different spices. It's very
Mm,
much a spiritual experience, actually.
yeah,
You
I
know,
can totally envision. I
yeah,
know a person or two that is that for sure.
cool.
It's not just eating your favorite meal; it's something a little deeper.
Well, eating your favorite meal could be an experience too. Just
When I
saying.
Houston, Texas, we called an Uber driver. We had just eaten at a barbecue restaurant, kind of the famous one.
Yep.
And we got in the Uber and we said, "Hey, where's there a really awesome church around here? Because we want to hear some like great gospel music, you know?" And he's like, "What do you mean? You just came from church."
You see, there you
So,
go.
so they already get it down in
They
Houston.
already get
They
it.
already get it.
That's
That, that,
great.
that barbecue restaurant, that's church.
Okay, so the next spiritual style is a traditionalist. And this is someone who's attracted to the sacred and experienced the holy and the comfort found in ritual.
Hmm.
So, you may have experiences. I don't know how you grew up. I grew up, actually, I went part of the time in my school life, I went to a Catholic school. And of course, we would go to church every week, and, during school hours, and we would go to the big cathedral. And there's this like wonder and awe in being in a space like that. And actually, the old churches that were built during medieval times, they were designed to give people a spiritual experience, because they wanted, the populace to experience the wonder and grandeur of God. And there was no internet or anything to watch like that, but they made these beautiful stained glass windows, and the sun would come through them and give people that kind of visceral experience. And then the ritual really supports people's spiritual lives. And I'm not really a traditionalist, but I remember times when I've been moved by ritual at the same time. When I was maybe 15, we walked on May Day. We walked around the playground. It was, I think, to Mother Mary, and we were just like walking around, and the spring blossoms were out. And I really did have this experience of like awe and wonder. And so, somebody who loves ritual, you know, really perhaps enjoys lighting candles, enjoys, you know, any kind of ritual. And I
Mm.
think with ritual, it's always important to understand what is behind the ritual, because people can look at ritual and say, "Oh, what does that mean?" But, for many people, that's really their channel actually to the divine and to God. So, and then there's
Wow.
this, yes.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say I would have never thought of myself as traditional, but as having a stint as a pastor, we did a small ceremony, and I was often surprised how moving they were. You know,
Yeah.
I'd be standing in the corner officiating something, and and here's the a little flower presentation, and then two little kids like present flowers to their parents, and then the parents turn around and give it to an offering table, and I felt myself like almost crying a couple of times. I'm
Yeah.
like, this is what's I didn't see that coming, so
Mm,
I've become, in my years just
mm,
very recently, I've become an advocate and a fan of holding on to certain traditions, not because they are the requirement for getting into heaven or any of that
mm-hmm,
stuff, but because they communicate and pass something down
mm-hmm.
to the next generation. That's what I value about that. How are our kids supposed to know that we think about God at all if there's no outward expression of
Expression.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Anyway, but you
no,
can.
that's beautiful. And, many times rituals ground us. Maybe we can't focus or we feel scattered, but then performing a ritual can bring us into a sacred space and into a sacred moment. So, ritual plays an important part in our lives for sure.
Absolutely.
And then the next one is an aesthetic, and they enjoy and need solitude to connect to God. So they may enjoy spiritual practices like meditation or fasting,
Mm,
but they really seek that aloneness. This is something that they want to experience and do alone.
mhm.
So I meet God in my own space. I meet God alone. And that's like a beautiful experience. And, for some people, they feel like, well, oh, I know people. One time someone said to me, "Oh, Heather, why don't you go to like a 7 day silent retreat?" And I go like, "What?" Like, can I be silent
Oh,
for 7 days? Like, I know that's a thing and it's deep, but like, is that me?
is
But
that possible?
is that possible? But I know people that have done that. In fact, my business partner David Young has been to I think maybe a 10 day silent retreat, and it's profound and moving, and you can experience the divine, and you can discover things about yourself and your own nature.